My name is Leonidas Bell. I am 70 years old. 1 month after I paid $100,000 for my daughter's lavish wedding, the photographer called me, his voice shaking. He said, "Sir, I noticed something terrible in the photos. Come to my studio now and do not tell your daughter." When he showed me what he found, I finally understood the man my daughter had married, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Before I tell you what I saw in those photographs, let me know in the comments where you are watching this story from. And please like this video and subscribe to Sugar Revenge if you believe that a father's job is to protect his family no matter the cost. The wedding was perfect, or at least that is what everyone kept saying. The crystal ballroom shimmered under the light of 1,000 tiny bulbs. White roses, my late wife Rose's favorite, were everywhere, their scent thick in the air. My daughter Naomi looked like a queen. Her dress, a cloud of white lace, must have cost more than my first car. She was radiant, her eyes locked on her new husband, Brendan Sharp. I stood near the back by the towering ice sculpture of a swan, trying to blend in. I felt invisible. My only suit, a simple dark wool I bought for Rose's funeral 10 years ago, felt heavy and out of place. It was clean, it was pressed, but it was not designer. It did not belong here among the silk and the diamonds that filled the room. The music softened, and I saw them approaching Brendan and his mother, Margot Sharp. Margot was a tall, thin woman poured into an expensive silver dress that glittered. She looked at me not as a person, but as a piece of furniture that was slightly misplaced, something the staff had forgotten to move. "Leo," she said, her voice smooth, but cold as the ice sculpture beside me. "We are so glad you could make it. I do hope you're finding everything acceptable." Her eyes flicked over my suit, a barely perceptible tightening at her lips. "This venue is a bit high-end, perhaps, compared to what you're accustomed to." Brendan, my new son-in-law, put a hand on her arm, smiling. "Mother be nice. Dad Leo is family now." He called me Dad Leo, but it sounded like a nickname for a friendly old dog, not a father. It was a pat on the head. "It's just, well," Margot continued, ignoring her son and speaking at me. "We just want to make sure Naomi has the best. She is a Sharp now, after all. She has standards to maintain." I simply nodded. I held my tongue, a skill I have perfected over 70 years. What Margot did not know, what no one in this room knew, was that this entire high-end spectacle was being paid for by me. $100,000. That was the modest contribution Naomi had asked for. $100,000 which I had quietly transferred from my pension fund. That was the story I had always told Naomi. That I was a simple, retired logistics manager living comfortably but simply on my pension. The truth was different. The truth was that my late wife Rose and I had built an empire, a massive logistics company from nothing. But Rose hated what money did to people. She hated the arrogance, the entitlement. So we made a pact. We would live simply. We would raise Naomi to value work, not wealth. We would protect her. After Rose passed, I kept that pact. I let my sister Vera run the company publicly, while I remained the silent majority owner, the invisible hand. I lived in my small apartment, drove my 10-year-old car, and watched my daughter grow, hoping she would become a woman who valued love and character above all else. But as Margot and Brendan smiled their tight, superior smiles, acting as if they were the hosts and I was the charity case, I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. They thought I was poor. They thought I was a simple, retired old man who had spent his last dime on this party, and they were treating me exactly as they believed I deserved. Their condescension was a physical thing, a thick, suffocating blanket. "Well," Brendan said, clapping his hands together with false enthusiasm, "enjoy the party, Leo. It's a magical night. We have to go greet the donors for the new wing." They turned and walked away, Margot whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. They didn't offer me a drink. They didn't introduce me to their side of the family. I was the checkbook, and now that the check had been cashed, I was just an embarrassing relative in an old suit. I retreated further into the shadows near the heavy velvet curtains, just wanting the night to be over. I thought of Rose. She would have hated this. She would have seen through Margot in a second. She would have grabbed my hand, and we would have gone home to our comfortable, quiet apartment and laughed about all this fakery. But Rose was gone, and I was alone in this sea of strangers. That is when I saw it. Naomi and Brendan had moved onto the adjoining balcony. They must have thought they were alone, hidden by the glass and the music. The argument was silent, but the body language was violent. Brendan was leaning in his face, inches from hers. I saw Naomi shake her head, her expression terrified. Then Brendan grabbed her wrist. He didn't just hold it, he gripped it. I saw my daughter wince, her face twisting in pain as she tried to pull her arm free. My blood ran cold. My feet felt nailed to the floor. I took a step forward, ready to cross that ballroom and tear his hands off my child. But just as I moved, Brendan saw me through the glass. In an instant, his face changed. The anger vanished, replaced by that wide, charming politician's smile. He released Naomi's wrist, wrapped his arm around her waist, and waved at me. Naomi, rubbing her arm, immediately forced a bright smile and waved too. "Just having a moment, Dad," Brendan called out cheerfully, his voice muffled by the glass. "So happy I'm overwhelmed." I stopped. I watched them. My heart was pounding a desperate drum against my ribs, but I told myself what any father wants to believe. "It's just wedding jitters," I murmured to myself. "It's just the stress of the day. He's emotional." I turned away from the balcony, forcing the image from my mind. I did not know that in 1 month a photographer would call me and show me that I had been wrong, that it wasn't jitters, it was a warning. A month passed. I tried to bury the memory of that moment on the balcony. I told myself it was wedding stress, exactly what I had wanted to believe. Life settled back into the quiet rhythm I had built for myself. I read the newspaper in my small, sunlit kitchen. I walked to the corner store. I managed my real finances online, the vast, complex accounts that Naomi knew nothing about, and then I managed the small pension account she believed was my entire life. It was a peaceful existence built on a lie I had maintained for her own good. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. "Hello? Mr. Bell? Mr. Leonidas Bell?" The voice on the other end was strained, high-pitched, with an anxiety that immediately set me on edge. "This is Leo Bell. Mr. Bell, this is Gregory Kincaid, the photographer from your daughter's wedding." I sat up straight in my armchair. "Mr. Kincaid, is there a problem with the album? I thought Naomi picked it up last week." There was a heavy pause, just the sound of him taking a deep, shuddering breath. "No, sir, the album is fine. The album is... It's what I left out of the album. It's the other photos, the raw files." He sounded terrified. "Mr. Kincaid, you are not making any sense. Sir, I need you to come to my studio. Right now. Please." His voice dropped to a frantic whisper. "And Mr. Bell, you cannot tell your daughter. Do not tell Naomi. And whatever you do, do not tell her husband, Brendan." He hung up. Just like that. The line went dead. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold, heavy rhythm that echoed the fear in his voice. Do not tell Naomi. Why? Why would I hide anything from my own child? My first instinct, the fatherly instinct that has guided me for 30 years, was to call her. I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, and went to voicemail. I tried again immediately. This time she picked up. "Dad." Her voice was sharp, impatient. It was not the warm, loving voice of the daughter I had raised. It was the clipped, efficient, cold tone of a woman I barely knew. It was Brendan's tone. "Naomi, honey, I just got a strange call." "Dad, I am in the middle of a meeting with Brendan. Is it urgent?" I hesitated. The photographer's warning was screaming in my head. "Do not tell her." "No," I said slowly. "No, it's not urgent. I wanted to hear your voice." I heard a sigh, sharp and clear, the sound of someone being inconvenienced. "Dad, I really cannot do this right now. We are trying to finalize a major deal. I will call you next week, okay? We will do dinner." "Naomi, wait." But the line was dead. She had hung up on me. Next week. She was my only child, the center of my world since Rose died, and she had dismissed me like a telemarketer. A deep, cold dread settled in my stomach. This was worse than the balcony. This was a confirmation. I grabbed my keys and my old wool coat, the one Brendan had openly mocked, the one he said made me look destitute. I didn't call the private car service that my company Bellwether Logistics kept on retainer for me. I walked to the street and hailed a yellow cab, just like the retired Leo I had pretended to be for so long. The drive to Kincaid's studio in the Arts District was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My mind was a whirlwind. What could be in those photos? What was so terrible that a stranger would risk getting involved? So terrible, He was afraid for me to tell my own daughter the studio was on the third floor of an old brick building. The hallway smelled of turpentine and old coffee. Kincaid's name was painted in flaking gold letters on a frosted glass door. I knocked my knuckles, hitting the glass. The door opened just a crack. A single bloodshot eye peered out. It was Gregory Kincaid. He was a young man, maybe 30, but he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His hair was wild, his clothes rumpled. "Mr. Bell." "Yes." He yanked me inside, pulling me in by the sleeve of my coat. I heard the click of 3 deadbolts sliding into place behind me. The studio was dark, the blinds drawn tight. The only light came from a single large computer monitor in the far corner, casting a pale blue glow on his face. "Mr. Kincaid, you are frightening me. What in God's name is going on? Please sit down." He pointed to a metal stool. He was visibly trembling. I almost didn't call you sir. I swear. I'm just a photographer. I take pictures of happy people. That's my job. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I asked. "What trouble are you in?" "I was going through the final digital files," he stammered, his hands fluttering over the keyboard. "The raw shots for my portfolio. I always review everything, thousands of pictures. And I started noticing a pattern. Something wasn't right." He walked over to the computer, his hands shaking so badly he could barely control the mouse. "Look, I saw you that night. I saw you looking at them on the balcony. I thought, just like you probably did, that it was just wedding stress, nerves, right?" "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This," he said. He clicked the mouse. The screen lit up with an image from the reception. It was Naomi and Brendan sitting at the head table, raising their glasses for a toast. They were both smiling. Everyone at the table was smiling. A perfect picture. "I don't understand," I said. "It's a beautiful photograph." "That is not the photograph, sir," Kincaid said, his voice cracking. "That is the wide shot. The one everyone saw. But I took this one with my telephoto lens, from across the room. I was testing the light. Look." He clicked again. The image changed. It was a tight, magnified zoom. It was focused on just Naomi and Brendan, but from a lower angle. It was focused on the space under the table. My breath hitched in my throat. I stood up from the stool, leaning so close to the screen that my nose almost touched it. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was Brendan's hand. He was not toasting. Under the pristine white tablecloth, hidden from me, hidden from all the guests, his left hand was clamped around Naomi's wrist. He was squeezing so hard that his knuckles were white, his veins bulging. He was digging his fingernails directly into her skin. And my daughter, my Naomi, she was smiling for the cameras. Her champagne glass was held high. But her face, seen this close, seen in this terrible secret photograph, was a mask of pure, silent agony. Her eyes were shut tight, and a single tear was escaping, a tear that was invisible from across the room. "My God," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "It gets worse, Mr. Bell," Kincaid said, his hand trembling as he clicked the mouse to the next file. I wasn't just watching them. I was watching who they were watching. And I saw this. "What the hell is this?" I put my hand on the monitor, my fingers tracing the outline of my daughter's pained, forced smile. "It's a fight, Kincaid. It's just a newlywed spat." I said the words out loud, trying to convince myself as much as him. He grabbed her too hard. He was excited. He's a young man. They had a long day. It's nothing. I stepped back from the screen, my hands clenching and unclenching at my sides. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. This was Naomi, my little girl. She was smart. She was strong. She would tell me if something was truly wrong. She wouldn't just sit there and smile while being hurt. Gregory Kincaid just shook his head, his face pale in the blue light of the monitor. "Sir, I wish that's what it was. I really do." His voice was low, almost a whisper. I almost deleted this. I almost convinced myself of the same thing. I told myself it was none of my business. He took a shaky breath. "But that photograph of her wrist, that's not what I'm talking about. That's just the context." "Context?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Context for what? For what happened 20 minutes later at the back entrance?" "The one near the kitchens." Kincaid's hands moved over the keyboard, his fingers clicking rapidly, nervously. "I was taking a break," he said, not looking at me, his eyes glued to the screen. I went out the service door to get some air. The music was muffled, and I saw your son-in-law, Brendan. He was agitated, pacing back and forth, checking his phone every few seconds. Kincaid brought up the first image in the new series. There was Brendan. His perfect $1,000 tuxedo was rumpled, his tie loosened. He was standing by the large, steaming dumpsters in the dimly lit alley behind the grand ballroom. He looked nothing like the charming, polished groom I had seen an hour before. His face was twisted in a mask of anger and... was it fear? I thought he was just hiding from the reception. Kincaid tried to joke, but his voice was flat. So I kept my distance. I had my long lens on. I figured maybe it's a funny runaway groom moment, something for the blooper reel. But then, Kincaid said, clicking the mouse again, this car pulled up, a black Escalade. It didn't just drive up, it slid into the alley, dark and silent like a shark. It had no license plates. The next photograph showed a man getting out of the SUV. He was huge. His neck was as thick as a tree trunk, and he was wearing a cheap, shiny suit that strained over his massive shoulders. His face looked like it had been in a few too many arguments with a brick wall. A long white scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his chin. Brendan went right over to him, Kincaid narrated, clicking through the photos rapidly like a grim stop-motion film. He started talking fast, gesturing wildly with his hands. The big man was calm, just listening, not saying a word. The next photo showed the big man shaking his head. The one after that showed Brendan, his face pale with panic. And then, Kincaid whispered. Brendan reached into the inside pocket of his wedding jacket. Kincaid clicked again. I thought he was pulling a gun, Mr. Bell. I swear my heart stopped. I almost ran. But look. The next photo was sharp, clear, and damning. Brendan was holding a thick brown manila envelope, the kind banks use for large cash withdrawals. He was handing it to the big man. Kincaid clicked again. The next photo showed the big scarred man, Sully, opening the envelope. He wasn't even trying to be discreet. He fanned the cash, a massive stack of $100 bills, counting it right there in the alley under the single yellow security light. But the big guy didn't look happy, Kincaid said. He zoomed in on the man's face. He was scowling. He said something to Brendan. The next photo showed Brendan, his hands up, palms out as if he was pleading. And the next photo made my blood turn to ice. The big man had grabbed Brendan by the lapels of his brand new tuxedo. He lifted him slightly, shoving him hard against the brick wall. Brendan's head snapped back. He looked terrified. Kincaid clicked again. The man shoved Brendan back. Brendan stumbled, almost falling over a pile of trash bags. The big man laughed, a silent, ugly movement on the screen. He got back in his Escalade and drove away as silently as he had arrived. The final photo in the series was of Brendan alone by the dumpsters. He stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. Then he straightened his jacket, smoothed his hair, and put that charming smile back on his face. He walked right past me, Kincaid said, his voice trembling. He didn't even see me hiding in the shadows. He went straight back inside. 2 minutes later, I saw him on the dance floor dancing with Naomi. He was laughing, smiling like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just been manhandled by a thug in an alley. At his own wedding. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Gambling, drugs. Blackmail. What was this? Who was this man? Mr. Kincaid, who was that man? I asked, my voice low and dangerous, a voice Naomi had never heard. Gregory Kincaid finally turned away from the monitor to look at me. His bloodshot eyes were wide with a fear that was contagious. That's why I called you, sir. That's why I locked the doors. That's why I'm scared. He swallowed hard, the sound loud in the dark room. I'm a wedding photographer. I've worked in this city for 15 years. I've seen some crazy things at receptions. Drunk uncles, brides fighting with their mothers. But I also hear things. I know people. I know faces. He pointed a trembling finger at the image of the scarred man on the screen. That is not just a man, Mr. Bell. That is Bad Debt Sully. He is not just a thug, he's a loan shark. The most notorious one in the city. He doesn't just break legs, sir. He makes people disappear. Kincaid looked at me, his face slick with sweat. I don't want any trouble. I don't know what your son-in-law is into, and I don't want to know. But I recognized him. Sully. He was at your daughter's wedding making a cash deal in the alley. I thought you, as her father, needed to know that. Now please, take the files. I'm deleting everything. I never saw you. This meeting never happened. Kincaid was dragging files on his computer desktop to the trash icon. his hands shaking so badly he had to aim the mouse twice. He emptied the trash bin icon, then looked at me wild-eyed. "It's gone. Everything. Off my hard drive." I did not say a word. I reached into the deep pocket of my old wool coat. My hand came out holding a thick roll of cash. $100 bills. $2,000. Kincaid's eyes, bloodshot and terrified, widened at the sight of the money. He had expected the poor father-in-law. He had expected me to be as helpless as he was. I placed the money on his desk next to the monitor. "This is for your time, Mr. Kincaid," I said. My voice was quiet, steady, but it had a coldness in it that made him freeze. "And this," I tapped the small black USB drive he had set aside, "is for my daughter." He pushed the drive toward me, his hand sliding away from it as if it were radioactive. "Take it, sir. It's all there. The raw files, everything. I didn't edit anything." I picked up the small drive. It felt impossibly heavy in my palm. "Mr. Kincaid," I said, locking my eyes on his, "as of this moment you deleted these files because they were corrupted. You never reviewed them. You never called me. We never had this conversation." He nodded so fast his head seemed to bobble on his neck. "Absolutely, Mr. Bell. I never saw anything. I am just a photographer. I take pictures of happy people. That is my job." "Good," I said. I pocketed the USB. "See that you remember that." I walked out of his dark studio past the smell of turpentine and fear and stepped back out into the bright, indifferent sunlight of the city. I walked past the cab stand, past the bus stop. I did not go toward my neighborhood. I walked 2 blocks over to the financial district where the buildings were not made of old brick, but of glass and steel. I walked into the tallest one, the Bellwether Tower. I walked through the silent revolving doors. The lobby was vast, cool, and silent, the floor a gleaming, polished expanse of black marble. The air smelled faintly of expensive leather and success. The security guard at the main desk, a large man in a sharp uniform, saw me. I knew for a fact he was ex-Secret Service. He nodded respectfully. "Mr. Bell, good to see you, sir." I nodded back. "Morning, Frank." I walked to the private elevator bank, the one hidden behind an unmarked mahogany panel. It required a specific key card. I swiped my card, a simple, heavy black card with no numbers, and the doors slid open instantly. The elevator was lined with dark wood and soft light. It did not have buttons for other floors. It had one destination, the penthouse. The doors opened onto the executive reception area. It was silent, just the gentle hum of a hidden air system and the distant, rapid clicking of a keyboard. The view from this high up showed the entire city spread out below us, the river winding its way to the harbor like a silver ribbon. Cynthia, my executive assistant for 20 years, looked up from her desk. Naomi believed Cynthia was an old friend from my bowling league. Cynthia did not smile. She was too professional for that, but her eyes were warm. "Good morning, Mr. Bell. We were not expecting you today. Is everything all right?" "Just handling some personal business, Cynthia," I said. My voice here was different. It was not the voice of Dad Leo. It was the voice of the man who owned the building. "Hold all my calls." This was my real life. This was the secret I had kept from my daughter since the day she was born. Naomi believed I was a mid-level logistics manager who had retired on a modest pension. She believed I lived in that small 2-bedroom apartment because it was all I could afford. She believed my greatest financial stress was the rising cost of property taxes. I let her believe it. I needed her to believe it. It was the last promise I ever made to my wife. Rose had been the heart of Bellwether Logistics. I was the numbers man, the strategist, but she was the soul. We built it from a single rusty truck and an office in our basement. We worked 18-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and a shared relentless dream, and we succeeded. We succeeded beyond anything we could have imagined. By the time Naomi was 10, we were worth hundreds of millions. And Rose hated it. She hated what money did to people. She saw how old friends suddenly became beggars, how family members transformed into vultures with their hands out. "I will not let this poison our daughter Leo," she had told me one night, her voice fierce, standing in the massive kitchen of a mansion we had just bought and would never move into. "I will not let her become one of those entitled, hollow people who think work is something other people do." So we made the pact. We sold the mansion. We stayed in our simple neighborhood. We drove domestic cars. We told Naomi we were just comfortable. When Rose got sick, the pact became her dying wish. Her final words to me in that hospital room were not, "I love you." We already knew that. Her final words were, "Protect her, Leo. Protect her from this." and she had tapped her frail finger against the glass window looking out at the gleaming, expensive hospital wing that our money had paid for. So I did. After she died, I retired. I moved into the small apartment. I put my sister Vera in charge as the public-facing CEO. I became a ghost, the silent owner, the man who lived on a pension. But I never stopped protecting Naomi. I paid off her student loans through an anonymous grant foundation I had created. I bought her first car, telling her it was a certified pre-owned when in reality it was brand new. I just had an associate drive it for 1,000 miles first. I paid the down payment on her first apartment, filtering the money through a first-time buyer program I had my lawyers invent. She thought she was doing it all herself. She had no idea her entire adult life was a carefully curated safety net. I was so proud of her. Until Brendan. Until this arrogant, smiling con artist had walked into her life. And now he had made the fatal mistake. He had mistaken my choice to live simply for a lack of power. I entered my office. It was twice the size of my entire apartment, minimalist and clean, with a single massive mahogany desk facing a wall of glass that overlooked the entire harbor. I sat in the heavy leather chair. It felt good. I picked up the secure encrypted phone on my desk, a phone Naomi did not know existed. I pressed one button. It rang twice. Yeah. The voice on the other end was gravelly impatient. Raleigh, it's Leo. There was a half-second pause. The impatience in the voice vanished, replaced instantly by pure, focused business. Mr. Bell, it has been a while. What do you need? I have a job for you, Raleigh. I said, my voice low and steady, the voice of the man who built this tower. My son-in-law, Brendan Sharp. I looked at the small, black USB drive in my hand, the drive containing the images of my daughter's pain and my son-in-law's treachery. I want to know everything, I said. I want to know where he buys his coffee. I want to know who cuts his hair. I want to know every dollar he has ever spent and every dollar he owes. And Raleigh. I paused, the image of that scarred man flashing in my mind. I especially want to know why he was paying bad debt Sully a stack of cash in an alley at his own wedding. I want the answers yesterday. Roland Pierce did not waste time. 48 hours. That is all it took. I had not slept. I stayed in the penthouse office, showering in the private executive bathroom, eating the food Cynthia silently brought to my desk. I just stared out the glass wall, watching the city lights blur as my world rearranged itself. I watched the sun come up twice. At exactly 9 o'clock on Thursday morning, my door opened. Raleigh walked in. He looked exactly the same as he had 2 days ago. The same rumpled trench coat, the same tired eyes. He sat down in the heavy leather chair across from my desk, pulled a thick file folder from his coat and dropped it onto the mahogany. The sound echoed in the silent room. He's a mess, Leo, Raleigh said, his voice like gravel. Your son-in-law is not just a problem. He is a walking catastrophe. I opened the folder. It was meticulous. Photographs I had never seen, bank statements, printouts of encrypted text messages. Start from the beginning, I said. Brendan Sharp. Raleigh began, leaning forward. 32 years old. Official title, independent consultant. Real title, professional gambler. He tapped a photograph of Brendan at a dimly lit poker table, his face arrogant, a pile of chips in front of him. He's not just a weekend player, Leo. He's a high-stakes fool. Sports betting, underground poker rooms in the city, online casinos. You name it, he has lost money on it. Which brings us, Raleigh continued, to your man in the alley. Bad debt Sully. Brendan has been in Sully's pocket for about 6 months. He started small. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, trying to chase his losses. But he lost big. He lost really big on the playoffs. He is in the hole for exactly $250,000. $250,000. The number hung in the air, cold and heavy. I thought of Naomi, my daughter, standing in my small, simple apartment asking me to mortgage my home. The home I had shared with her mother for 30 years, the only real home I had ever had. She had asked me to risk that my only perceived asset for $250,000, the exact amount. My heart, which I thought was already broken, found a new way to crack. So, the wedding, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. The $100,000 wedding that I paid for. Raleigh nodded grimly. That is where it gets interesting, Leo. Brendan didn't just borrow from Sully to cover his gambling losses. He borrowed more. He flipped a page in the file. He went to Sully desperate and he spun a new story. He told Sully he was marrying the daughter of a very wealthy, very reclusive man. He pointed a thick finger at me. You Leo. He meant you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brendan's plan, Raleigh said, was to throw the most lavish wedding he could. He told Sully that this party was his one big chance to get his rich father-in-law to finally open up his checkbook. He convinced Sully to lend him more money to throw this magnificent party, promising Sully he would secure a huge investment from you, his new family connection. He promised Sully he would pay him back $300,000. So the money in the alley? I started the pieces clicking together with horrifying speed. Was a panic payment? Raleigh finished. Sully showing up at the wedding was not part of Brendan's plan. Sully was probably getting nervous, wanted to see this rich father-in-law for himself. Brendan must have freaked out. The envelope you saw in the photo, my guess is it was the cash from the wedding gifts. I stared at him. Think about it, Raleigh said. Brendan stole the money from his own wedding gifts. Whatever cash they got from guests, he took, it ran to the alley and gave it to Sully as a down payment, just to keep Sully from breaking his legs in front of the string quartet. A con man. A desperate, terrified con man who had stolen his own wedding gifts, and my daughter, my Naomi, was tied to him. What about his family? I asked, my voice a low growl. Margot, Preston Sharp. They were there acting like royalty. They must be backing him. They must have money. All entry 2025 11 18 15 44 40.063510 IE gave me a thin, cruel smile. This was the part he always enjoyed the most. Backing him. Raleigh laughed, a dry, harsh sound that held no humor. Leo, they are the con. He slid another photograph across the polished desk. It wasn't of an alley. It wasn't of a poker game. It was a picture of a bright red foreclosure notice nailed to the heavy oak front door of a sprawling brick mansion. The same mansion Margot had been describing at the wedding as their summer home. The Sharp family company, Sharp Imports, went bankrupt 3 years ago, Leo, Raleigh said, his voice dropping. They lost everything. They have been living on credit cards, fumes, and small-time cons ever since. That grand mansion they brag about, it was seized by the bank 18 months ago. The luxury car Margot drives is a long-term rental, and they are 3 months behind on the payments. They are currently living in a 2-bedroom garden-level apartment in the suburbs, 20 miles from here. He leaned in close. They are not just broke, Leo. They are penniless. They are as fake as your son-in-law. This whole thing, your daughter, the wedding this was their lottery ticket. I left the Bellwether Tower from the private garage. The steel door slid silently shut, and I was back in the world as Leonidas Bell retired. I drove my simple 10-year-old sedan, the one Naomi thought was my only possession, back to the small 2-bedroom apartment that she believed was my entire world. The contrast was jarring. The air in the penthouse was cool, filtered, silent. The air in my apartment building's hallway was warm, smelling of my neighbor's cooking and old carpet. I walked in and sat on my old, comfortable sofa, the springs groaning in familiar protest. I was no longer the man who commanded a $100 million corporation. I was just Dad Leo again, a lonely old man. I was putting the mask back on, and I was waiting. I did not have to wait long. That evening, just as the sun was setting, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was them, Naomi and Brendan. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. I took a deep breath, composed my features into a look of mild, pleasant surprise, and opened the door. Naomi, honey, Brendan? What a surprise. Come in, come in. Naomi stepped inside and gave me a quick, tense hug. Hey, Dad. She looked exhausted. The radiant glow from the wedding was gone. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her smile was a thin, brittle line stretched across her face. She was not sleeping. Good. Brendan followed all smiles and false energy, clapping me on the shoulder. Dad Leo, good to see you, sir. We were in the neighborhood, thought we'd stop by and see our favorite guy. He was carrying a bottle of wine. It was a cheap brand, the kind of thing he thought a poor person would appreciate. Well, this is a treat, I said, playing the part of the slightly befuddled, lonely father. Let me get some glasses. They sat on my old sofa. Brendan looked around the small living room, his eyes scanning everything, the worn armchair, the small television, the framed photos of Rose and a younger Naomi. He wasn't just looking, he was appraising, calculating. So, I said, handing them glasses of the cheap wine, how is married life treating you two? It's wonderful, Dad, just wonderful, Naomi said, her voice high and unnatural. She took a sip of her wine too quickly. It really is, Brendan said, sliding an arm around her. He pulled her close, and I saw her body go rigid for just a fraction of a second before she relaxed into his side. But, Brendan said, his tone shifting, becoming serious. The reason we wanted to talk to you, Leo, is that we are on the verge of something huge. I leaned forward, playing my part. Huge? What do you mean, son? Brendan's eyes lit up with a fake theatrical fire. He was a terrible actor. Dad, Leo, I have been working on a deal, a massive opportunity, a real estate project downtown. It's a can't miss. We're talking generational wealth here. He leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a huge secret. My partners, they're big time, but they've left one small slot open for family, one slot, and they offered it to me. I kept my face neutral. A business deal, Brendan? You know I don't know much about those things. I was just in logistics moving boxes. That's the beauty of it, Dad. You don't have to know anything, he laughed. You just invest. The projections are, well, they're staggering. We could double our money in 18 months, triple it in 3 years. This is it, Leo. This is the big one. Well, that sounds very exciting, I said slowly. But Brendan, if it's such a big deal, it must require a lot of money. Money I just don't have. You know my situation. I'm on a fixed pension. I watched him. This was the moment. Brendan's smile did not falter. That's just it. We're so close. We just need to secure our spot. He paused for dramatic effect. We need $250,000. The number. The exact precise number that Raleigh had put in his report. The exact amount he owed Bad Debt Sully. He was not even smart enough to change the number to make it less obvious. He was arrogant. He was desperate. I let the silence hang in the room. I let it stretch out, filling the space with my unspoken acted confusion. I looked at Naomi. Her face was pale. She was looking at her hands, which were twisting together in her lap. $250,000, I said, letting my voice crack just a little. Son, that's more money than I've seen in my entire life. I can't help you. I'm sorry. This was Naomi's cue. She looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She was a better actor than he was. She had my wife's eyes, and she was using them against me. Dad, she began, her voice trembling. I know it's an impossible number. And I know you don't have that kind of money just sitting around. We know that. She took a shaky breath and looked at Brendan, who nodded at her. Go on. But we were talking, Dad, she continued, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. And we were thinking about this apartment. My heart, which I thought was already a cold, dead stone, managed to break a little more. This apartment, she said, gesturing around the small room. The one you and Mom, the one you've lived in for so long. It's in a good neighborhood. It has value, Dad. A lot of value. Naomi, I whispered, faking a shock I did not feel. What are you asking me? We were thinking, maybe, just maybe, she said, the tears now beginning to fall. You could mortgage it. You could take a loan against it. For us. Just so we can get started. It's the chance of a lifetime, Dad. It's for our future. For your future grandchildren. There it was. The ultimate betrayal. The grandchildren card. She was asking me to leverage the only thing she thought I had left in the world. The home I had shared with her mother for 30 years. The very floorboards Rose had walked on. She was asking me to risk it all for their lie. I stood up. I walked to the window, my back to them, pretending to be overwhelmed. A mortgage, I said, my voice thick with acted emotion. Naomi, Brendan, that's my home. That's all I have left from your mother. This is a very big decision. I need time. I need to think about this. I turned around to look at them, and I saw it. Brendan was still smiling at me, that same earnest, pleading smile. But his right hand, which had been resting on Naomi's knee, was now gripping her thigh just above the knee, hidden from my full view, but not from my angle. He was gripping her so hard his knuckles were white. I saw Naomi's body go rigid. I saw her wince, a tiny, almost invisible gasp of pain that she covered with a cough. The charm was gone. His eyes fixed on me were no longer warm. They were cold, hard, impatient. "Of course, Dad, Leo," Brendan said, his voice still buttery smooth, but his eyes told the truth. "Take all the time you need, a day or two." His grip on Naomi's leg tightened, and I saw her flinch again. "But this opportunity won't wait forever," Brendan said, his smile becoming a thin line. "A chance like this, it comes once in a lifetime. You wouldn't want to be the reason we miss it, would you?" The threat was no longer subtle. It was hanging in the air of my small apartment, as real and as foul as the cheap wine he had brought. He was not just asking, he was demanding, and he was using my daughter as his collateral. The cheap wine left a bitter taste in my mouth long after they walked out my apartment door. I stood there listening to their footsteps fade down the carpeted hallway, their light, cheerful laughter echoing as they reached the elevator. They were energized. They were excited. They had scented blood in the water. They believed they had cornered the weak old man. The image of Brendan's hand gripping my daughter's leg flashed in my mind, his cold eyes staring at me, daring me to refuse. The threat was not just about money anymore. He was hurting her, and she was letting him. I walked back to my small kitchen, my legs steady, my hands no longer trembling. The act was over. The confusion, the hesitation, the feigned shock, it all evaporated the second the door clicked shut. I felt a cold, sharp clarity, the kind I used to get in the early days of bellwether logistics, right before a hostile negotiation. I did not pick up the simple phone on my wall, the one Naomi knew about. I went to my bedroom, opened the false bottom of my old cedar chest, the one Rose's father made for her, and took out a slim, encrypted satellite phone. I pressed the only number on its speed dial. It connected in less than a second. "Raleigh," I said. "Leo." That was fast. What did they want? "Exactly what you said they would. $250,000. They want me to mortgage this apartment." I heard Raleigh let out a long, slow whistle. The audacity. "So what's my next move? You want me to pull the plug on their credit?" "No," I said, my voice low and hard. "Not yet. I need something else first." I paused, the next words feeling like broken glass in my throat. "Forget Brendan. I need you to focus on Naomi." There was a rare silence on Raleigh's end. "Your daughter Leo, are you sure?" "She was there. She was the one who asked me for the mortgage. She had tears in her eyes, Raleigh. She was performing. Or maybe she was terrified. I do not know which is worse. I need to know what she knows. I need to know when she knew it. I need to know if she is a victim in this or if she is a volunteer. I need to know if the daughter I raised is still in there." "Leo, that's a different kind of investigation. That's getting into family communications. It's messy." "I know what it is," I snapped. "I hired you because you are the best. By any means necessary, Raleigh. Find out. I have to know." "You got it, Mr. Bell," he said, the business tone back. "But you better prepare yourself. In my line of work, when you have to ask that question, you usually already know the answer." He was right. I already knew. I just needed the proof. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I did not go back to the Bellwether Tower. I stayed in my small apartment, a prisoner in the very stage I had built for myself. I sat in the old armchair, the one Rose and I bought at a yard sale in 1983. I stared at the pictures on the wall. Naomi at her high school graduation, smiling full of promise. Naomi and Rose at the beach building, a sandcastle, their faces bright with sun and laughter. Where did that girl go? The phone buzzed. A secure message from Raleigh. "It is done. The file is uploaded to the secure server. I am sorry, Leo." I am sorry. 2 words. That was all it took for my last shred of hope to die. I walked over to my simple desk, sat down at my simple laptop, and logged into the encrypted server Raleigh and I used. The file was there. Naomi, zip. My hand trembled as I clicked it. It was not financials, it was communications. Text messages, emails, and 3 audio files. Raleigh had been thorough. He had gotten into their cloud backups. He had gotten everything. I started with the texts. They were from 3 months ago before the wedding. "Naomi, Brendan, I just spoke to Dad. He agreed to the $100,000 for the wedding. He thinks it's his entire retirement savings." Brendan, "See, I told you, he's a soft touch. Good work, baby. That's phase 1. Naomi, "I feel terrible. He was so happy to do it. He said he was just glad he could help his little girl." Brendan, "Stop feeling terrible. It's your money. He would have left it to you anyway. We're just accessing it early. Think of it as an inheritance advance. Now let's focus on phase 2 after the honeymoon. The apartment. My breath caught. Phase 2. They had been planning this all along. The wedding was just a test, a way to see how much they could get. I felt sick. But I had to see it all. I clicked on the audio files. They were voicemails. The first one was from Naomi to Brendan. Her voice was trembling, clearly upset. Naomi audio. Brendan, it's me. I just left Dad's. I do not know if I can do this. He looked so sad when I mentioned the mortgage. He really believes he's just a retired old man. He trusts me. It feels wrong. So wrong. Call me back. I closed my eyes. A tiny, foolish spark of hope lit up in my chest. She was a victim. She was scared of him. He was forcing her. She still loved me. Then I clicked the next file. Brendan's reply. A voicemail he had left for her an hour later. His voice was not charming. It was cold, hard, and laced with contempt. Brendan audio. Wrong, you want to talk about wrong. What is wrong is that he is sitting on $1 million apartment while your future, our future, is falling apart. What is wrong is that he paid for your education, but he will not pay for our life. He owes you this, Naomi. Remember what my mother told you. He is testing you. He is manipulating you with his poor old man routine. Do not be weak. Do not let him win. We are this close. Get the money. Do what you have to do. The last file was a text message from Naomi, sent 1 hour after Brendan's voicemail, the final nail. Naomi text, "You are right. I am sorry. I was being weak. He has no right to hold that apartment over us. It is my birthright. I will handle it tonight. I will get him to agree to the mortgage. I love you." The laptop screen blurred. I leaned forward, my head in my hands. The silence in my small, simple apartment was deafening. This was worse than the photographs. This was worse than the alley. This was the voice of my daughter, the child I had protected, the woman I had built a shadow empire to keep safe. And she had, in the end, been corrupted anyway. Not by my money, but by the idea of it. By the greed of others. The pact I had made with Rose. It was a failure. I had protected her from the money, but I had failed to protect her from greed. I had failed to teach her character. I had been so busy building a safety net I had forgotten to build her a backbone. My grief was immense, a physical weight that pressed down on me heavier than any loss I had ever known. Even Rose's death, as tragic as it was pure. It was a tragedy of nature. This was a betrayal. This was an execution of 30 years of love. The grief lasted for exactly 1 minute. Then it was gone. It did not fade. It calcified. It turned instantly chemically into something else. Something cold, something precise, something absolute. I picked up my satellite phone. I pressed the second number on my speed dial. A woman's voice answered, crisp and professional. "Vera Bell, CEO's office." "Vera," I said, my voice empty of all emotion. "It's me." There was a pause. "Leo." "What is it? You sound awful." "I need you in the penthouse," I said. "Now, clear your schedule for the rest of the day." "Leo, I am in the middle of closing the Singapore deal. I cannot just to hell with the Singapore deal." I interrupted, my voice a low growl that she had not heard in a decade. "This is more important. Call the lawyers. I want them in the boardroom in 1 hour. We are changing my will. And Vera," I said as I stood up and looked out the window at the city that I owned, "we are going to war." I took the private elevator straight to the penthouse. The doors opened not into a reception area, but directly into the heart of Bellwether Logistics. This floor was not for show. It was the operational core, a sprawling open space of glass and steel alive with the quiet, intense hum of high-stakes commerce. My sister Vera Bell was not waiting in her office. She was standing in the center of the floor, perfectly still, watching me walk toward her. Vera was 65, 5 years younger than me, but she looked a decade younger than that. She wore a sharp, custom-tailored crimson suit, her hair cut short and severe. Where I had cultivated an image of softness and retirement, Vera was all edges, all polished steel. She had been the public face of this company, the CEO, the iron fist in the velvet glove, while I remained the shadow, the owner. She had canceled the Singapore deal. I knew she had. The moment she heard my voice, she would have dropped everything. "Leo," she said, her voice quiet but carrying across the marble floor, "you look like you have seen a ghost, or you are about to become one." I did not say a word. I walked past her into the vast minimalist glass box that served as my office. I sat down behind the massive empty mahogany desk. Vera followed me, closing the heavy soundproof door behind her. The roar of the city outside vanished, replaced by a thick, pressurized silence. "What is it?" she asked, her arms crossed. "And do not tell me it's nothing. You have not been in this office on a weekday in 3 years. You have not used that tone of voice with me since we bought out our last competitor in 2008. So, what is it? Is it Naomi?" I slid my simple, cheap laptop, the one I used in my poor life, across the polished desk. I opened it. I pressed play on the second audio file Raleigh had sent me. Brendan's voice filled the high-ceilinged room, cold, cruel, and full of contempt. "What is wrong is that he is sitting on $1 million apartment. He is manipulating you with his poor old man routine. Do not be weak. Do not let him win. Get the money. Do what you have to do. You have to." Vera listened, her face unmoving, a perfect mask of corporate stillness. The audio file ended. The silence that followed was heavier than before. "I told you," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I told you the day she brought that parasite to Sunday dinner. I ran a preliminary background check on him the next day. I told you he was bad news. I told you he had debts. I told you he was a leech." "I know what you told me," I said, my voice hoarse. "But you," she continued, her anger starting to build a low-controlled fire in her eyes, "you wanted to honor Rose's wish. You wanted to let Naomi live her own life. You wanted her to make her own mistakes. You were so afraid of controlling her with your money that you stepped back and let him control her instead." "She is not just being controlled, Vera," I said. I could not look at her. I stared at the screen. "She is a participant." I clicked the last file, the text message, Naomi's reply. "You are right. I am sorry. I was being weak. It is my birthright. I will handle it tonight." Vera read the words on the screen. I watched the color drain from her face. The anger she had for Brendan was hot, but the anger she now felt for Naomi was a different temperature. It was absolute zero. She turned away from the desk and walked to the glass wall, looking down at the city. "That ungrateful," she whispered, her voice shaking with a rage I had not seen in decades. "After everything. After we built this empire, built it to keep her safe. After we shielded her from every hard day, every failure, every consequence. She did this. For him. She thinks I am poor." I said the words tasting like ash. "She thinks that little apartment is all I have. She is trying to steal the last thing from a retired old man. She thinks you are poor because you let her," Vera shot back, spinning around. "You were too soft, Leo, we both were. We were so terrified of turning her into some rich, entitled brat that we went too far the other way. We made her hungry. We made her feel like she was lacking. Remember that academic fellowship she won to study in Paris? That was me, Leo. That was bellwether money, funneled through 3 foundations. Remember those inherited bonds she got from Rose's grandmother when her car broke down? That was our money. We have been funding her entire adult life in secret, and she thinks she's self-made. She has always taken the money, Leo. She just never had to see where it came from." Her words were true. We had created a perfect illusion, and now that illusion was being used as a weapon against me. We had given her everything, but we had taught her the value of nothing. Vera walked back to the desk, her face set. The rage was gone, replaced by the cold, precise focus of the CEO who had doubled our company's value. "So, what is the play?" Your voice on the phone. "You have a plan." Do I cut her off? Do I call Raleigh and have him send a message to the gambler? Do I call the police and report the conspiracy to commit fraud? "No," I said. I stood up from my chair and joined her at the glass wall. "Not yet. A simple cutoff is too clean. They won't learn. They'll just move on to the next con. Or worse, Brendan will get desperate and Sully will make him disappear. That is too easy for him." I looked down at the city below. The cars looked like tiny ants, all moving according to a set of rules. "They want to play in the big leagues," I said, my voice as cold as hers. "They think this is a game about money and power. They want to steal my small retirement fund. Fine. We will show them what real money and real power look like." Example 2025 1118 1544 40.063510 era. Looked at me, a slow, cold smile spreading across her face. Oh, Leo, Rose always said you were the ruthless one. I am going to enjoy this. They are worried about a loan shark, I said. Fine. I will be the loan shark. I want you to do something, Vera, immediately. Get our financial team ready to move a significant amount of liquid cash off the books untraceable. How much? $500,000 in cash. Vera did not even blink. And what am I buying? A debt, I said. Get Raleigh back on the line. Tell him I need him to set up a meeting with bad debt Sully. Tell Sully that a private buyer is interested in one of his assets. The debt of Brendan Sharp. Vera's smile widened. You are going to buy his debt. You are going to own him. Yes, I replied. Brendan wants my money. He will get it. But he will get it on my terms. He wants to be in my debt. So be it. He is about to find out what happens when you try to swindle the man who owns the bank. Raleigh set the meeting. It was not in a boardroom. Men like Sully despise sterile environments. They prefer places with history, places with dark corners. He chose the private capo room at the Sicilian and Old World Steakhouse downtown that smelled of aged whiskey, garlic, and 100-year-old secrets. I arrived first, of course. I was not there as Leonidas Bell, the retired logistician. I was there as Mr. Bellwether. The name Raleigh had put on the street a ghost buyer, a silent force interested in acquiring distressed assets. I wore a dark, simple, but impeccably tailored suit, the kind of suit that costs $10,000 precisely because it does not look like it costs $10,000. Vera was not with me. This was my stage. The door opened. Two mountains of muscle in tight suits entered first, scanning the room, their eyes flat and professional. Then Sully walked in. He was exactly as the photographs had shown. The cheap, shiny suit, the thick neck, the white scar that pulled his eyebrow into a permanent sneer. He was not a sophisticated man, but he was a dangerous one. He saw me, a 70-year-old black man, sitting alone at the end of the long table, a glass of water in front of me. He almost smiled, a flicker of contempt. He clearly expected someone larger. He waved a thick hand, dismissing his guards, who closed the heavy door behind them, leaving us alone. So, Sully said, his voice a low rumble as he sat down, scraping the heavy chair across the floor. You are the ghost, Mr. Bellwether. You look smaller than I pictured. I am retired, I said, my voice quiet. I prefer a small footprint. He laughed at that. Right, retired. And retired men like to buy bad debt. Raleigh said you were interested in one of my assets, a piece of garbage named Brendan Sharp. He owes you $250,000, I stated. It was not a question. Sully's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, resting his massive forearms on the table. He owed me $250. That was before the vigorish. That was before he missed his payment. That was before he lied to me. He smiled, but it was all teeth. Now, he owes me more. He owes me his time, his fear, and he owes me his father-in-law. I kept my face a mask of calm, polite interest. His father-in-law? You mean the old man who paid for the wedding? Sully laughed again, louder this time. You have done your homework. Yeah, the father-in-law. Leo Bell, some sad old widower. This kid, Brendan, he is stupid, but he is also a decent liar. He came to me 6 months ago already in the hole, but he had a plan, a big one. My fingers laced together on the table. I remained perfectly still. I let him talk. He says, Sully, I am marrying this girl. Her old man is loaded, but he is a recluse, a simpleton. He dotes on his daughter. She is all he has. He would do anything for her. Brendan's plan was that this wedding, this big fancy party, was the key. He told me he was going to use the wedding to prove he was a big shot, and then after the honeymoon, he and the daughter were going to convince the old man to give them the money. An investment, he called it. An investment? I repeated the word, tasting like poison. Yeah, Sully sneered. He promised me $300,000, $50,000 for my trouble for fronting him the money for the wedding itself. He said, the old man will pay. He will mortgage his house if he has to. He is desperate for family. He does not want to lose his daughter. The kid was proud of himself. He actually thought he was a genius. My heart felt like a block of ice. He is desperate for family. He had weaponized my love for Naomi. He had analyzed my deepest wound, the loss of Rose, and turned it into a tool for extortion. "And now?" I asked. Sully's smile vanished. "And now I am tired of waiting. The kid is stalling. I showed up at the wedding to remind him I am real. He gave me a taste scraped from the gift envelopes. Pathetic. He says he needs more time. He says the old man is thinking about it." "He is," I said. Sully stopped. "What did you say?" "I said the old man is thinking about it. But men like that, they are slow. They are cautious. You are waiting on a maybe, Sully. A promise from a desperate fool who already lied to you." I slid my hand under the table and brought up a polished, dark aluminum briefcase. I placed it on the table and clicked it open. Inside, neatly stacked, was cash. Sully's eyes, which had been cold and calculating, now lit up with a raw, animal greed. "What is this?" he whispered. "That," I said, "is $350,000. In cash. Right now." Sully stared at the money, then at me. "Why? Why would you pay more? You could get him for his original debt." "You misunderstand," I said, pushing the briefcase an inch closer to him. "I am not here to negotiate. I am here to buy. You want $300,000, but you have to wait. You have to hope this stupid kid Brendan can successfully con his father-in-law. You are waiting on a maybe. I am offering you $350, right now, a sure thing, more than you were promised, and all you have to do is walk away." I pulled a single folded document from my jacket pocket, a legal transfer of debt drafted by the best lawyers in the country. "You sign this. The debt becomes mine. You forget Brendan Sharp's name. You forget his father-in-law. You never contact them again. You walk out of here with your briefcase clean." He did not hesitate for long. Greed always wins over patience. He licked his lips. "Give me the pen." He signed the paper with a flourish. He spent the next 5 minutes counting the cash, his thick fingers moving surprisingly fast. He snapped the briefcase shut. The deal was done. I folded the debt transfer and put it in my breast pocket. It felt warm. I now personally owned Brendan Sharp. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Bellwether," Sully said, standing up. He was happy. He had won. "We are not quite done," I said. He stopped his hand on the doorknob. His eyes narrowed. "The deal is done." I signed. "The deal for the debt is done," I agreed. I gestured to the empty chair. "But that extra $50,000, that was not just for the debt, Sully. That was a retainer. For your services." Sully was confused. He sat back down slowly. "My services, I do not work for you." "You do for $50,000, I said, my voice flat. "I need you to do something for me, a small favor, a piece of performance art, let's call it." "I do not do performance art," he growled. "Oh, you will do this," I said, leaning forward for the first time. "It is very simple. I am hosting a small family dinner next week, and I need you to be the guest of honor. A dinner party." He was completely lost. "Yes, you will not have to stay long. You will not even have to eat." I smiled, and I knew it was not a kind smile. "You just need to show up at exactly 8 o'clock and ask my son-in-law for your money." I walked back into the penthouse office. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing me inside my tower of glass and steel. I was holding the debt transfer document. It was a single piece of paper, but it was a leash. I now owned my son-in-law. Raleigh was standing by the window, looking down at the city, his hands shoved deep in his trench coat pockets. He had been waiting for me. "So the shark took the bait," Raleigh said, not turning around. "The deal is done," I confirmed, placing the paper on my desk. "I own Brendan Sharp." Raleigh turned a grim look on his face. "That's good, Leo, because you only bought the foot soldier." I paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Raleigh said, walking toward the desk, "while you were out buying the son, I was digging into the parents, Margot and Preston Sharp. You thought Brendan was the con artist. You're wrong. He's just the amateur they sent in first. They are the professionals." Raleigh threw a second thinner folder onto my desk. It was not thick with financial statements. It was printouts of emails. "Brendan is a desperate gambler," Raleigh said. "His parents, they're something else. They're architects." I opened the folder. The first page was a printout of an email from Margot Sharp to her son Brendan. It was dated 4 months ago, 2 months before the wedding. My eyes scanned the text, my blood running colder with every line. "Brendan, darling," it began, "your father and I have reviewed the financials on Naomi's father. The poor old man routine is clever, but it's a front. It has to be." I looked up at Raleigh. "How?" "They're con artists, Leo. They smell money even when it's hidden. They saw the Bell name, they knew you were retired from logistics, and they assumed you were a quiet millionaire, the perfect target. They just underestimated how quiet." I continued reading Margot's email. "He is old, he is lonely, and he is clinging to his only daughter. This is our chance. This is how we rebuild everything. You must secure this, Brendan. You must lock her down. That wedding is not a party, it's a closing. It's the first step to getting back what we deserve." I felt the bile rise in my throat. This was not Brendan's desperate gamble. This was a calculated family infiltration. They had targeted Naomi. They had targeted me. "They're not just broke," Raleigh said, confirming my thoughts. "They are predators. They're running a long con. They see you as the bank, and Naomi as the key to the vault. They are using your daughter as a willing tool to pry it open." I flipped the page. Another email. This one was from Preston Sharp, the father, to Brendan. It was more direct, less emotional. "Son, the time for games is over. Your mother tells me the old man paid for the wedding without blinking. That confirms our hypothesis. He's liquid. He's the one. Now you need to move on to phase 2. The business investment. Use the $250K debt as the excuse. It's the perfect leverage. Make him feel like he's saving you, saving his daughter's new life." I leaned back in my chair. "They knew about the debt. They knew about Sully." "Knew about it," Raleigh scoffed. "They probably encouraged it. It makes him desperate. It makes the lie more believable. It gives you a crisis to solve." And then I saw the last one, the one that shattered whatever small hope I had left for my daughter's judgment. It was an email from Margot to Brendan sent just last week, after their visit to my apartment. "He's hesitating," Margot wrote. "He's weak, but he's cautious. You need to use the girl. Make her cry. Make her beg him. He won't be able to refuse his little girl. This is her responsibility. He owes her this. It is her birthright. Tell her that. You must get that money, Brendan. Sharp Imports depends on it." "Sharp Imports," I whispered, looking up at Raleigh. "I told you they were bankrupt," Raleigh said. "This is their plan. They weren't just trying to pay off Brendan's debt. They are planning to use your money, what they think is your life savings, to relaunch their failed company. They want to use your retirement fund as the seed money for their comeback. They are not just trying to rob you, Leo. They are trying to replace you. They are trying to become you, using your own daughter as the bait." I closed the folder. The cold, calculated rage I felt when I heard Naomi's voice on that recording was nothing compared to this. This was a war I had been drafted into without my knowledge. They had planned every step. They had used my love, my privacy, my grief for Rose, all as weapons against me. "Okay," I said. My voice was calm. Vera would have been proud. It was the calm of absolute certainty. They want to play this game. We will play this game. And I picked up the simple, untraceable flip phone I used for my dad Leo persona. I turned to Raleigh. "You can go, Raleigh, but stay close." He nodded once, understanding. "It's your show, Leo." He walked out of the office, leaving me alone with my 2 phones, my 2 lives. I took a deep breath. I pushed down the voice of the CEO. I channeled the voice of the lonely, confused 70-year-old widower. I dialed Naomi. She picked up on the first ring. "Dad?" Her voice was anxious, tight, as if she had been waiting for the call. "Naomi, honey, it's Dad." I made my voice crack just a little, the sound of a man defeated. I've been thinking all night. I could not sleep." "Oh, Dad, are you okay?" Her voice was filled with a bright, false concern. I'll be fine, honey," I whispered. I was thinking about your mother, about how she always wanted you to be happy, how she always wanted you to have everything." I let out a shaky sigh. "You are right. It is just an apartment. It is just bricks and mortar. You are my daughter. You are all I have left." I heard a sharp intake of breath on her end, a gasp of victory. "So, you will do it," she whispered, trying to contain her excitement. "Yes, honey." I said the words tasting like acid. I will call the bank tomorrow. I will mortgage the apartment. You will get your $250,000. I heard a muffled sound like her covering the phone and letting out a squeal of triumph. She came back on the line, her voice now dripping with fake sugary relief. Oh, Dad, thank you. Thank you. You won't regret this. This is going to change everything for us. I know, honey, I know, I said. But I have one condition. The line went quiet. A condition? Yes, if I am doing this, if I am taking this risk, I want to do it right. I want to celebrate as a family. Celebrate, Dad, that's great. Yes, I want you to invite Brendan's parents. Margot and Preston, the four of you. We will all go out. Somewhere truly special. To celebrate our new partnership. Let's go to the Founders Club. I arrived at the Founders Club an hour early. I did not enter through the main doors. I used the private members' entrance, the one that leads directly to the elevator bank reserved for the original board. The maitre d', a man named Thomas, whom I had known for 30 years, greeted me not with a bow, but with the quiet respect of an old colleague. Mr. Bell, he said, his voice a low, respectful murmur. It is a pleasure to see you, sir. The magnate room is prepared exactly to your specifications. Low lighting, the fireplace is lit, and the staff is on standby. Thank you, Thomas, I said. And you remember the instructions for tonight? Of course, sir, he replied, his face impassive. No one is to know you are the host until you give the signal. The reservation is under Mr. Sharp's name as you requested. They will believe they are in charge, and the waitstaff, they have been instructed to treat you as a guest. A simple guest. Good, I said. I stood by the roaring fireplace, my back to the room, looking at the large oil painting of my late wife, Rose. She had donated it to the club 20 years ago. It was the only place I could see her in public. I waited. At precisely 7 o'clock, I heard their voices. They were loud, too loud for this place. The Founders Club was not a restaurant. It was a sanctuary of old money, a place where deals were whispered, not announced. Their voices cut through the heavy, leather-scented air like a cheap knife. My goodness, Margot Sharp's voice trilled, full of false sophistication. Brendan, darling, are you sure this is the right place? It's so dark. So old. It's prestigious, mother, Brendan replied, his voice tight with an importance he did not possess. This is where the real players meet, I heard Thomas's smooth voice. Good evening. The reservation for Sharp. Yes, Preston, the father boomed. A private room, I believe, for 5. Of course, sir. The magnate room, if you will follow me. I heard their footsteps on the thick Persian rug as they entered. I heard Margot gasp. The room was designed to impress, lined with dark mahogany and books that were actually read, the air heavy with the scent of the wood fire. Oh my, she whispered. I turned around slowly from the fireplace, clasping my hands behind my back, adopting the posture of the poor old man. Ah, you made it, I said, a simple, slightly nervous smile on my face. They all stopped. They stared at me. Leo, Margot exclaimed, her voice a mix of shock and instant irritation. What are you doing here already? Brendan, honey, Naomi said, rushing to his side, her voice a nervous flutter. Dad, I thought we were meeting you here. I took a cab, I said simply. I wanted to make sure I was not late. This place is, it is very impressive, Brendan. Very impressive. Margot and Preston exchanged a look. I knew exactly what they were thinking. They thought I had booked this. They thought I had drained my tiny pension and my life savings to make this one grand, pathetic gesture. They thought I was trying to impress them. The arrogance returned to their faces almost instantly. Oh, Leo, Margot said, walking into the room and running a hand over the back of a heavy leather chair as if appraising it. You really should not have. This is far too much for you. She smiled at her husband, a cruel, private little smile. I mean, a room like this. It must have cost you. Well, I imagine it must have cost you all of your retirement savings. It is a very sweet gesture, Leo, but quite reckless. Do you not think? Yes, Dad. Leo, Brendan said quickly, catching his mother's cue. He put his arm around me, a gesture of false condescending comfort. This is incredible, but we could have just gone to a normal steakhouse. You did not need to spend everything you have on us. I saw Naomi wince. Even she, my co-conspirator, my betrayer, felt the sting of their open disdain. I just smiled the same humble, simple smile. "Oh, goodness, no," I said with a small, self-deprecating laugh. "I did not pay for this. I could never afford a place like this. Not on my pension." The tension in the room instantly evaporated. Margot let out a small, relieved laugh. "Oh, I see. Of course. Brendan, darling, you must have booked this, you clever boy keeping secrets from your own mother." Brendan beamed, accepting the false praise. "I have my connections, mother." "Well, thank goodness," Preston said, finally sitting down at the head of the table as if he owned it. "For a moment there, Leo, I thought you had lost your mind. Spending a year's income on a single meal, that would be grounds for, well, for concern." The unspoken words hung in the air, grounds for having you declared incompetent. I just chuckled. "My goodness, no. I am just a guest like you. But," I added as I took my seat, "I must admit it is nice to be back here. I am actually very fond of this club." "Oh." Margot asked, her interest clearly gone now that she knew I was not the host. She was already examining the wine list, her eyes wide. "You have been here before, on a catering job, perhaps?" "Something like that," I said quietly. I looked up at the oil painting of Rose, my wife, above the fireplace. My late wife and I, we were part of the group that bought this building back in 1985. I was on the original board. I am a founding member. The sound of Preston dropping his heavy silver fork onto his plate was the only noise in the room. It was a clean hit, a perfect strike. Brendan, who had just been lifting a water glass, froze his mouth open. Naomi stared at me, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Margot's perfectly plucked eyebrow shot up so high it nearly touched her hairline. "You..." "What?" Preston stammered. "A founding member," I repeated simply as if discussing the weather. "Rose designed the decor for this very room. She always did have the most wonderful taste in art. That is her portrait above the fire." Margot's smile was gone. It was not just frozen, it was shattered. She was processing. Her mind was spinning, trying to make the two realities fit. The poor, simple, retired old man, and a founding member of the most exclusive, powerful, and private club in the city. The con was broken. The narrative was scrambled. Brendan was the first to recover. He was a gambler after all. He knew how to read a sudden change at the table. He let out a loud, false laugh. "See, I told you Dad Leo is just full of surprises." That is incredible, Dad. Why did you never tell us?" "Oh, I never mention it," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "Rose preferred a quiet life. We always found it a bit showy." I let that word hang in the air. "But tonight is a special occasion. It is a celebration, is it not? A celebration of our new partnership." That was the magic word. Partnership. It was the key. It brought them right back from the brink of confusion. The promise of money, the smell of the $250,000 was stronger than their shock. Margot's smile returned, though it was now strained, uncertain. "Yes," she said, "a partnership." The waiters entered, silent and efficient. I had pre-ordered the best of everything, the lobster bisque, the aged tomahawk steaks, and the wine. I had specifically chosen a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, a bottle that cost more than my 10-year-old car. Preston and Margot, who Raleigh had confirmed were living on microwaved meals, instantly transformed back into their arrogant selves, desperate to regain control of the narrative. "Exquisite," Preston declared, taking a large, uneducated gulp of the wine. "A bit underdeveloped, perhaps, but a fine vintage. It reminds me of a bottle we had at our villa on Lake Como." "Oh, yes, darling, the 92, Margot chimed in, swirling her glass with far too much enthusiasm. "This is acceptable. But the 92 was truly in a class of its own." I just nodded my face, a perfect mask of polite agreement. I watched Naomi. She had not touched her food. She was watching me, her eyes wide with confusion. She was trapped. Was her father a secret millionaire? Or had he just told a bizarre, grandiose lie? She did not know which was true, and I could see the terror in her as she realized she did not know me at all. Brendan did not care. He was focused on the prize. He ate quickly, drank the $5,000 wine like it was juice, and finally he steered the conversation back to the deal. "This is a fantastic start, Leo," he said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "This project, it is going to redefine this family. It is going to secure Naomi's future, our children's future." Preston Sharp, now puffed up on wine he did not understand and a confidence he did not deserve, leaned across the table. He believed he had won. He believed the old, simple fool, whatever his secrets, was in his pocket. "He is absolutely right, Leo," Preston said, his voice booming too loudly in the quiet room. He placed his hand on the table, a gesture he thought was one of power. "This $250,000, it is just the beginning. It is just seed money. You stick with us, son." He winked at me, a grotesque, familiar gesture. "You stick with us, and you are finally going to see what real money looks like." I looked at him. I looked at Margot, who was smiling in triumph. I looked at Brendan, who was vibrating with anticipation. And I looked at my daughter, Naomi, who was just staring at her empty plate, a willing accomplice to the theft of her father's dignity. I smiled, a slow, calm smile. "You are absolutely right, Preston," I said. "It is just the beginning, and I am so glad we are all here to celebrate it." I reached into the breast pocket of my old worn suit. "So, let's not wait any longer." "Yes, let's not wait," I said. My voice was calm, almost cheerful. I reached into the inside pocket of my old wool suit jacket. Their eyes, all four of them, were fixed on my hand. They were like a pack of wolves waiting for their meal. Brendan was practically vibrating a predatory tension in his shoulders. Margot was smiling a wide, triumphant smile of pure greed. Preston leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped his wine glass. Even Naomi, my daughter, was watching me with a terrible, desperate hunger. My hand emerged. I was holding a checkbook. It was a simple, standard blue checkbook, the kind you get for free from a small-town credit union. It was the checkbook for my pension account, the account I had let Naomi see for years, the account that I kept just enough in to maintain my cover. "I agree, Preston," I said. "This is a moment to celebrate, a partnership." I pulled a pen from my pocket, and with a slightly shaky hand, a deliberate performance of an old man making a momentous decision, I began to write. I wrote out Brendan Sharp in careful script. I wrote out the numbers $250,000 and 0100. I signed it with a flourish, Leonidas Bell. I tore the check from the book. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I held it up. "Here it is," I said. Their eyes were glued to that slip of paper. It was their salvation, their victory. Brendan reached for it, his hand trembling with eagerness, but I pulled it back just out of his reach. "Ah," I said, a gentle, grandfatherly smile on my face. "Not just yet, son. Before we seal the deal, a toast. A toast is required for a moment like this." "Of course, a toast," Preston boomed, grabbing his expensive wine glass and raising it high. "To new partnerships, to the future." "To the future," Margot echoed, her eyes glittering as she looked at the check in my hand. "Yes," I said, picking up my own glass. "But I want to toast something specific. Something I have learned is more valuable than any amount of money. I want to toast to honesty, to truth." The word truth hung in the air. Naomi flinched. Brendan's smile tightened just a fraction. "In fact," I continued, setting my wine glass down and reaching into my other pocket, "I was so moved by our conversation the other night that I have something I would like to share." I pulled out my simple, old-model smartphone. The one Naomi had bought me for Christmas 3 years ago, the one she thought I barely knew how to use. "What is that, Dad?" Naomi asked, her voice sharp with sudden, unexplained anxiety. "It's just a little recording, honey," I said, tapping the screen. "You know my memory isn't what it used to be. Sometimes I like to record my thoughts so I do not forget." I smiled at Brendan. And our conversation the other night, Brendan, about this can't-miss opportunity. It was so inspiring, I just had to save it. Brendan's face went white. He knew. He did not know what I had, but he knew this was not part of the plan. "Dad, Leo, I do not think this is the time or place for—" "Nonsense," Margot interrupted, annoyed. "Let the man play his little tape. We have a check to cash." "Thank you, Margot," I said. "You are always so supportive." I tapped a button on my phone. The phone was already wirelessly connected to the high-end speaker system built into the private room. I had Thomas, the maitre d', set it up before they arrived. The The first sound that filled the room was the muffled click of a voicemail opening. Then Brendan's voice, cold, hard, and laced with contempt. What is wrong is that he is sitting on $1 million apartment. He is manipulating you with his poor old man routine. Do not be weak. Do not let him win. Get the money. Do what you have to do. The sound was crystal clear. It echoed off the mahogany walls. Margot's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Preston, who had been leaning back in his chair, suddenly sat bolt upright. Brendan looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He was not breathing. And Naomi, my daughter, she made a small choking sound like a dying animal. Her face crumpled. What? What is this? Preston stammered, his eyes darting from me to his son. Brendan, what is this? Brendan was speechless. Oh, but that is only half of the conversation, I said, my voice still light, still friendly. That was Brendan's advice, but it is the reply that I found so motivating. The reply that made me decide to give you this money tonight. I tapped the screen again. This time it was not an audio file. It was a text-to-speech program reading out the text message Raleigh had recovered. A calm, synthesized female voice devoid of all emotion read my daughter's words aloud. You are right. I am sorry. I was being weak. He has no right to hold that apartment over us. It is my birthright. I will handle it tonight. I will get him to agree to the mortgage. I love you. The robotic voice finished. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a dead, suffocating silence, broken only by the crackling of the logs in the fireplace. Margot and Preston were frozen, their faces masks of stunned disbelief. They were not shocked by the sentiment. They were shocked it had been recorded. They were shocked the con had been exposed. Brendan looked at Naomi, his face a mixture of pure terror and murderous rage. He had been found out. "Stop it!" Naomi screamed. The sound ripped through the room. It was not a word. It was a howl of despair. She lunged across the table, knocking over wine glasses, trying to grab my phone. "Stop it! Dad, please turn it off!" I held the phone calmly out of her reach. I did not move. I just watched her. Brendan grabbed her arm, yanking her back into her seat with a viciousness that made her cry out. "Shut up, you fool!" He hissed, his voice low and terrified. "That is enough." Preston Sharp said, his voice a low growl. He was staring at me, his eyes no longer arrogant but filled with a new dawning comprehension. He finally understood. "I quite agree," I said, turning off the phone and placing it on the table next to the check. "That is quite enough." The only sound of the magnificent room was the sharp, desperate sound of my daughter gasping for air. The logs in the fireplace crackled and snapped, indifferent to the lives that had just been immolated. Naomi stared at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with a horror that was not just about being caught, but about a new, terrifying reality. The poor old man was gone. "Dad," she stammered the word, a broken, pathetic sound. It was not like that. Brendan." "Silence," I said. My voice was not loud. It was a low, heavy command that flattened all other sound in the room. I did not look at her. I looked at all of them, one by one. Preston, his face a mottled, unhealthy red, his mouth half open. Margot, her eyes narrowed, her mind clearly spinning not in remorse but in rapid, desperate calculation. And Brendan, my son-in-law. He was looking at Naomi with a look of pure venomous hatred. She had failed. She had been weak. "It was not like that," I finally said, turning my gaze to my daughter. "Then tell me, Naomi, how was it? Was it not your voice on that recording? Was it not your words? It is my birthright?" I was upset," she cried, the tears now coming fast. He made me say it. I did not mean it. Dad, I was scared." "Scared," I repeated. I let the word hang in the air. "You were scared. So you decided to collude with a broke, desperate gambler and his bankrupt parents to steal from your own father. You decided to play the part of the loving daughter while you plotted to have me mortgage my home, the only home you have ever known, the home your mother died in. You were going to let me risk my retirement, my security, all for a lie, all for him. I pointed a steady finger at Brendan. He flinched. Dad, no, Naomi sobbed. We were going to pay you back as soon as the investment. I almost laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. You mean the $250,000 he owes to bad debt sully that investment, or the money he needed to relaunch his father's failed bankrupt company? Preston and Margot's heads snapped up. Their eyes widened. The con was not just exposed, it was dissected. You think I am a fool? I said, my voice quiet, but it filled the room. You have all been sitting here tonight drinking my wine, eating my food in my club, all while secretly laughing at the poor old man. You Margot with your condescending remarks about my pension. You Preston with your arrogant lecture about real money. I stood up slowly. I walked to the end of the table where my briefcase was resting. I opened it. I took out a thick stack of papers, the reports from Raleigh. I threw them on the table. The pages skidded across the polished wood, scattering among the expensive wine glasses and silver. This, I said, tapping the top page, is your acceptable lifestyle, Margot. A foreclosure notice on your summer home. This, I tapped another, is your class, Preston. A credit report showing $500,000 in defaults and liens against a company that has not existed for 3 years. I let them stare at their own ruin exposed for everyone to see. Then I turned back to Naomi. But you are the worst, I whispered, and the pain in my voice was real. Because you knew they were liars. You knew they were fake, and you chose them. You chose them over me. No, she cried. I love you, Dad. Love, I said. This is what you call love. Let me tell you what I call love. I pulled out another set of papers. Bank statements. My secret bank statements. The ones from the accounts I used to protect her. Your student loans from NYU, Naomi. $26,000 a year for 4 years. Did you think they just vanished? Did you really believe you got that anonymous alumni grant? That was me. Paid in full, every single cent. Naomi stopped crying. She just stared, her mouth open. Your first car, the certified pre-owned you were so proud of finding it was brand new. I had an associate at Bellwether Logistics drive it for 2,000 miles to make it look used just so you would feel like you had earned it. That was me. I threw another statement on the table. Your apartment, the one you live in right now, the one Brendan thinks you are paying for, the deposit that was me, the rent control you think you negotiated, that is me paying your landlord a $2,000 subsidy every single month for the last 3 years without you ever knowing. I own your building, Naomi. Brendan's head snapped toward her, his face a mask of pure reptilian shock. And this wedding, I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. This $100,000 party, this performance. This was the last check I will ever write for you. I paid for this. I paid for the dress you are wearing. I paid for the food you just ate. I paid for the very air you are breathing in this room. I leaned in my hands flat on the table, my eyes locked on my daughter. For 30 years I have been your silent, invisible safety net. I have been your guardian angel. I have honored your mother's dying wish to protect you. And this is how you repay me. You, my daughter, my blood. You sit there and plot to steal the one thing you thought I had left. You call it your birthright. Naomi was no longer crying. She was hyperventilating, her hand clutching her chest. Brendan and his parents were silent, stunned by the revelation of real wealth, a wealth they had not even begun to comprehend. They had been trying to pick the pocket of a king fighting over the lint, but it was Margot, the mother-in-law, who reacted first. Her shock did not last. It was quickly replaced by a hot, entitled rage. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. So what? She shrieked, her voice high and piercing. So you are rich. You lied. You lied to us. You lied to her. She pointed a shaking, diamond-covered finger at Naomi. You let her believe she was marrying into our status. You let her think she was marrying up. You deceived us. Margot, sit down, Preston hissed, finally realizing the hole they were in. No, she yelled, her face contorted. This is his fault. That money is her birthright. You do owe her. You owe us. My son has given her his name. He has given her a life. This wedding was an investment. The word hung in the air, the final confession. You owe us for that, Margot screamed, now completely unhinged. You owe us for everything. Now give my son that check. Margot's scream was still hanging in the air when I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through her hysteria like a razor. You are right about one thing, Margot, I said. This was an investment. I did not look at her. I turned my full attention for the first time that night to my son-in-law. Brendan was still frozen, his face pale, caught between the lie he had been told that I was poor and the evidence I had just presented the recordings. And speaking of investments, I continued, and the debts one incurs to make them, Brendan, you said you needed $250,000. Was that the correct number? Brendan's eyes darted nervously to his mother, then back to me. Yes, for the project. It's the buy-in. I see, I said. 250,000. That is a very specific number. It sounds less like a buy-in and more like a buyout. Perhaps a debt you owe to, say, bad debt Sully. The moment I said the name, every last drop of color drained from Brendan's face. He looked for the first time in his life genuinely terrified. He did not look like a con man anymore. He looked like prey. I don't know who you are talking about, he stammered, his eyes flickering toward the door. Do you not? I asked. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Thomas the maitre d', who was standing just outside the private room's heavy mahogany door. Then perhaps you can explain who this gentleman is. The door swung open. It did not open slowly. It was pushed open with force, slamming against the antique doorstop. The two mountains of muscle in cheap suits entered first. They fanned out, one to the left, one to the right, their hands clasped in front of them, their eyes scanning the room with a dead professional boredom. They were not here for the wine. And then Sully walked in. He was even more intimidating than his photographs. The scar on his face was a roadmap of violence. He was wearing the same shiny, ill-fitting suit he wore in the alley. He looked at the opulent room, the fireplace, the crystal, and he sneered, his lip curling in contempt for all of it. Sully, Brendan shrieked. It was not a word. It was a noise of pure animal panic. He scrambled backward, his chair tipping over and crashing onto the Persian rug. He fell against the wall, his hands held up. No, Sully, please. I told you, I just needed more time. It's a misunderstanding. I'm getting the money, I'm getting it right now. Margot and Preston Sharp were frozen in abject confusion. They looked at this thug who had just invaded their exclusive high-class dinner. Brendan, who is this animal? Margot hissed. Call security. Sully laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound that made the crystal glasses rattle. He ignored Margot. He ignored everyone except the man cowering on the floor. A misunderstanding kid, Sully rumbled, walking slowly toward him. I do not see any misunderstanding. I see a kid who owes me $250,000, plus the VIG, plus my time. I see a kid who lied to me about his rich father-in-law. No, he's not. Brendan stopped, realizing his own lie was collapsing on him. I'll get it, I swear. Just give me until tomorrow. Preston Sharp finally found his voice. Now see here, he blustered, standing up, though his legs were shaking. I do not know who you are, but you cannot just barge in here. We are in the middle of a private... Sully did not even look at him. He snapped his fingers. One of his guards moved so fast I barely saw it. He grabbed Preston by the front of his expensive suit jacket and shoved him back down into his chair. The sound of Preston's body hitting the wood echoed in the room. You, Sully growled at Preston. Shut up. Your turn is coming. He turned back to Brendan, who was now weeping. You got till tomorrow, that is a shame, kid, because I'm here for my money tonight. Please. Brendan begged, his hands clasped. Please, I'll do anything. Sully sighed, a theatrical, bored sound. You know, that is the good news, Brendan. You do not have to do anything. You are lucky. Brendan looked up, his face a mess of tears and confusion. Lucky. Yeah, lucky. Sully stopped, as if just noticing me for the first time. He walked toward the head of the table where I sat perfectly still. He looked at the half-eaten steak, the expensive wine, and then at me. You must be the father-in-law, the old man, Leo Bell. I am, I said, my voice even. Sully smiled, showing a row of gold teeth. Well, Leo Bell, this kid, he is very lucky to have you. He turned back to Brendan. See, kid, your debt. It has been paid, in full, an hour ago, every last penny, plus my bonus. Brendan, Margot, Preston, and Naomi all stared, their minds completely unable to process this new information. Paid, Brendan whispered. What, who? Sully did not answer him. He walked right past Brendan. He reached into the inside pocket of his shiny suit jacket. I saw Margot flinch as if she thought he was pulling a weapon. But his hand came out holding a single folded piece of paper. The debt transfer. He walked over to me to the head of the table. He did not look at the other sharps. He looked at me with the professional respect of one businessman for another. He placed the paper on the table in front of me, right next to the check I had written. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Bell. He said, his voice no longer a growl but a respectful murmur. I nodded once, a slight inclination of my head. Thank you for your promptness, Sully. You have been very helpful. The four of them watched this exchange. Their faces were a portrait of utter confusion. The wheels were turning, but the pieces did not fit. Why was this monster talking to me? How did I know him? How did I know the debt was paid? And then, in one agonizing, horrifying moment, the tumblers clicked into place. They all looked at me at the head of the table. They looked at the paper Sully had given me. They looked at the power I held, a power they had not seen. They finally understood. I had paid it. I was the one who knew Sully. I was the one who had arranged this. Sully turned to leave. He walked to the door, his 2 mountains of muscle falling in behind him. He stopped his hand on the heavy brass doorknob. He looked back over his shoulder, a final parting gift. He looked directly at Brendan, who was still on the floor, his face white as a sheet. By the way, kid, Sully said, his gold-toothed smile returning, you are not in the clear. You do not owe me any more. He pointed a thick, sausage-like finger straight at me. You owe him. Sully let that sink in. He looked at Brendan, then at Margot, then at Naomi. And honestly, he said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper, I think you were better off owing me. The heavy door closed with a soft final thud. Sully was gone, and I was left alone in the room with my new assets. The heavy door clicked shut. The sound was deafening in the absolute tomb-like silence. Sully was gone. I was left alone in the room with my new assets. I looked at the 4 of them. They were not just shocked, they were broken. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with a new dawning animal terror. They had escaped the shark only to find themselves in a locked tank with the whale. Margot and Preston Sharp were frozen, their faces slack with disbelief. Naomi was trembling, her hand pressed against her mouth, her eyes fixed on the empty doorway where Sully had just stood. Brendan. My son-in-law was still on the floor where he had scrambled away his expensive tuxedo covered in dust, his gaze fixed on the single folded piece of paper Sully had placed in front of me, the debt transfer. He was looking at it, and then he looked at me. He understood. They all finally understood. The poor, simple, retired old man they had planned to rob, the simpleton Margot had mocked, was now the man who owned them. I reached across the table and picked up the check I had written, the check for $250,000. Brendan's eyes followed it, a last pathetic flicker of hope in them. Maybe this was still part of the plan. Maybe I was still going to give it to him. I looked at the check, then I looked at him. I held it between my thumb and forefinger, and then very slowly, very deliberately, I tore it in half. The sound ripped through the silence of the room. I tore it again, and again. I let the small blue pieces of paper, their generational wealth, flutter from my hand and settle on the expensive table, scattering among the half-eaten lobster. Dad. Naomi's voice was a broken whisper. It was the only sound she could make. Dad, please, don't. We can. Silence, I roared. The word was not a plea. It was a judgment. It was a sound of such cold, absolute authority that Naomi physically recoiled, her hands flying to her face as if I had slapped her. Margot and Preston flinched. The mask of the simple, bumbling Dad Leo was gone forever. The man standing before them now was Leonidas Bell. And he was furious. I pointed a trembling finger at Naomi, not trembling from weakness, but from a rage so profound it was seismic. Do not, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Call me that. Dad is a name of respect, a name of love. You lost the right to use it the moment your fingers typed the words, "It is my birthright." I paused, letting the words sink in, letting her remember her own treachery. As of this moment, as of this night, you are no longer my daughter. But, she was sobbing, incoherent, shaking her head. But what? I snapped. Did you think I was guessing? Did you think that recording was all I had? I walked back to my briefcase, which sat on a small credenza by the wall. I pulled out the 2 thick folders Raleigh had given me. I walked back to the table and threw them down. They landed with a heavy final thud. The sound of truth. The sound of their lives ending. "This," I said, tapping the first folder, "is you, Brendan. Every gambling marker, every text message to Sully, every desperate sniveling plea for money, every lie you told, it is all in here." I turned my gaze to Margot and Preston, who looked like statues of arrogance shattered by a hammer. "And this," I said, sliding the second thicker folder toward them, "is you, Sharp Imports, bankrupt 3 years ago. The foreclosure notice on your summer home, the repossession warning on your rented car, the emails from you, Margot, encouraging your son to secure the asset, the messages from you, Preston, planning to use my money to relaunch your failed company." I leaned across the table. "I know everything. You sat here in my club, a club you could not even afford the entrance fee for. You sat here drinking my $5,000 wine and you lectured me on real money. You sat here and planned to steal my life savings." Their faces were a study in absolute horror. They had no defense. There was nothing to say. "You came to my apartment," I said, my voice dropping. "You saw my simple life, and you thought I was weak. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was an easy mark." I turned back to Naomi and Brendan. "You lived in your nice apartment. You drove your nice car. You had your perfect $100,000 wedding. And you thought you were so clever. You thought you were pulling it off." I let a cruel smile touch my lips. "Let me ask you a question, Naomi. That apartment you live in, the one on the Upper West Side, do you really think you got that lease because of Brendan's consulting job?" She stared at me, confused, her sobs catching in her throat. "I own the building," I said. "I have owned that entire block since 1998. The landlord you send your checks to, he is the head of my real estate division. The rent control you think you negotiated, that is a discount I authorized. That is my money you have been living on." Brendan's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with a new dawning betrayal. She knew nothing," I snapped. "She was just as blind as you. And the car, Brendan, the nice Audi you drive, the one you are 3 months behind on payments for. Who do you think holds the note, the bank number, a holding company? My holding company. I own your car. I own your home. I own you." I let that sink in. The silence was absolute. They were not just con artists. They were fools. They had been living inside my protection, inside my financial ecosystem the entire time they were plotting to rob me. I picked up my briefcase. I walked toward the door. "You have 24 hours, I said, not looking back. "I want you out of my apartment by noon tomorrow. The locks will be changed at 12:01 p.m. The car will be repossessed at 12:02 p.m. Whatever you leave behind will be considered a donation." "Dad, wait." Naomi screamed, finally finding her legs scrambling after me, her expensive wedding dress tangling in her feet. "You can't. We have nowhere to go. Please. We have nothing." I stopped at the door. I turned to look at her, my hand on the heavy brass handle. "Oh, you are wrong, Naomi," I said. "You have exactly what you wanted." I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the debt transfer, the one Sully had signed. "You have this," I said, holding it up. "A debt for $350,000, the price of your wedding, the price of your lies, and the price of my freedom from you." But you paid it," Brendan stammered, still scrambling up from the floor. "You can't." "I did not pay it," I corrected him. "I bought it. I am not your father-in-law, Brendan. I am your creditor, and unlike Sully, I have very, very good lawyers." I turned to Naomi, who was staring at the paper as if it were a snake. "You wanted your birthright. You wanted your inheritance in advance. Congratulations, you have it." I dropped the debt note on the floor at her feet. "My lawyers will be in touch." I walked out the door and did not look back. I heard her collapse, her sobs echoing down the empty mahogany-lined hallway. It was a terrible sound, but it was the sound of justice. 1 week, 7 days. I spent that time in the penthouse. I did not go back to the small apartment. I could not. That life, that persona was gone. It had been a shield, and now it felt like a costume I had shed. I spent those 7 days walking the silent rooms of my real home, looking at the art Rose had collected, staring at the city lights. I was finalizing the details. I was dismantling piece by piece the entire life I had built for my daughter. The automated payments, the secret trusts, the rent subsidies, the car notes. I cut every single string. Vera handled the immediate fallout. The apartment I owned, the one they lived in, was cleared out within 24 hours, just as I had ordered. My security team, professional and discreet, had overseen the move. Vera told me they left in a rage. Margot Sharp screaming obscenities at my men, threatening lawsuits. They had moved, as Raleigh had confirmed, into the tiny garden-level apartment with Preston's relatives, 4 adults crowding into a space meant for one. The Audi was repossessed the same afternoon. Brendan had apparently tried to block the tow truck, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. The driver simply showed him the paperwork signed by me, the legal owner, and took the car. They were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the debt I now held over their heads. On the 7th day, I went to my lawyer's office. Not the corporate lawyers at Bellwether, but my personal attorney, Harrison. His office was old world, smelling of leather-bound books and aged wood, a place where family fortunes had been made and unmade for a century. Vera was already there, sitting in one of the deep leather chairs, a file in her lap. She looked calm. She looked relieved. "Leo," she said, nodding as I entered. Harrison, a man in his late 70s with eyes that had seen everything, stood up to shake my hand. "Leonidas, it has been a long time." He gestured to the polished mahogany table. "The documents are prepared exactly as you specified in your instructions." I sat down. On the table was a thick, heavy vellum-bound document, my last will and testament, and next to it a shorter, simpler one, the Rose Bell Scholarship Fund Charter. "You are sure about this, Leo?" Harrison asked, his voice gentle. "There is no cooling off period. This is final. The disinheritance clause is ironclad. She will have no recourse." I looked at Vera. She was watching me, her expression unreadable. She knew what this cost me. "She would have liked this, Leo," Vera said softly, touching the cover of the Scholarship Fund Charter. "Rose, this is what she always wanted." I nodded, the memory of my wife flooding back sharp and clear. This was the final, most important piece of the story. This was the why. Rose and I had built our empire on a shared dream, but we came from 2 different worlds. I came from a family with modest means but good connections. Rose came from nothing. She came from a forgotten part of the city, a place of grit and survival. She was brilliant. She had been accepted to a prestigious university, a full ride for her academics. But she could not go. She could not afford the books, the food, the living expenses. Her family needed her to work, so she did. She worked as a waitress in a small diner, the same diner where I, a young, ambitious logistics manager, used to eat lunch every day. That is where I met her. That is where our life began. But she never forgot. She never forgot the feeling of having the door to the world slammed in her face, not because she was not good enough, but because she was poor. Years later, when Bellwether was a name that echoed in boardrooms across the country, she laid out her plan. "I do not want this money to make our daughter weak, Leo," she had said to me right here in this very office. "I do not want her to be one of those people who inherits a finish line. If we are going to have this wealth, it has to do something. It has to fix the one thing that was broken for me." That was her dream. The Rose Bell Scholarship Fund. A fund with one purpose: to find the other Roses. The brilliant kids from poor neighborhoods who had the grades but not the means. The ones who needed to pay for books, for food, for a place to live so they could focus on their education. "We will give it to the ones who have earned the chance, Leo," she had said, "not to the ones who just expect it." We had planned to set it up after I retired, after Naomi was settled, but then Rose got sick, and her last request to me, her dying wish, was, "Protect Naomi, but do not forget the others. Do not let our money become a curse." I looked at the documents on the table. This was not an act of revenge. It was an act of profound, agonizing love. It was the fulfillment of my last promise to my wife. Naomi had proven she was one of the people Rose feared. She was the one who expected it. She had called my life's work her birthright. She had not earned it. So by the very rules Rose and I had established, she could not have it. It had to go to the ones who deserved the chance. "I am sure," I said to Harrison. My voice was clear. I picked up the heavy, old-fashioned fountain pen. I signed the first page of the new will disowning Naomi Bell Sharp, citing her conspiracy to commit fraud against my estate. I signed the second page, naming my sister Vera as the sole executor and interim head of Bellwether. I signed the final, most important page, the one that transferred the entirety of my estate, the company, the real estate, the stocks, the offshore accounts, everything upon my death to be liquidated and placed into the permanent, unbreakable trust of the Rose Bell Scholarship Fund. It was done. Harrison took the documents, his face somber. "It is legally binding as of this moment, Leonidas. The previous will is null and void." We stood up. We shook hands. Vera and I walked out of the quiet wood-paneled office and into the elevator. The doors closed, and for the first time Vera spoke what she was feeling. "Are you all right, Leo?" she asked. "Not as a CEO, but as my little sister. Are you really sure she is still your daughter? She is still your blood." I looked at my reflection in the polished brass of the elevator doors. I saw an old man, tired but standing straight. "No, Vera," I said, and I meant it. My daughter was the little girl who held my hand in the park. My daughter was the teenager who cried when her first boyfriend broke her heart. My daughter was the young woman who graduated from college so proud of doing it on her own. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. We walked out. "That woman," I continued, "the one who sat across from me in that restaurant, the one who plotted with a family of bankrupt liars, the one who called my life's work her birthright and planned to steal my home. That is a stranger to me. That is a Sharp. My daughter, the one Rose and I raised, she is gone. I just finally attended her funeral." My cell phone buzzed in my pocket. The simple one. A text message from Raleigh. It was one sentence. "They are gone. All 4 of them. Left town last night in a U-Haul. The rental apartment is empty." Vera looked at me. "And the debt. The $350,000. The leverage you hold." I thought about it. I thought about the power I held over them, the power to ruin them legally, to chase them for the rest of their lives. "Have Harrison send them a payment reminder," I said, "once a month, to whatever new address they run to, for the rest of their lives." "But you are not going to collect, are you?" Vera asked. "No," I said as we stepped out onto the sunlit street. "I will never collect. It is not about the money. It is about the reminder. I want them to wake up every day for the rest of their miserable, greedy lives and remember exactly who they tried to con. I want them to know that I am still out here watching." I felt a sense of peace I had not felt since before Rose got sick. It was a cold quiet and absolute peace. The con was over. The debt was paid. I had protected my dignity, and I had finally truly honored my wife's legacy. This story teaches us a hard but vital lesson. True character is not defined by the money you have, but by how you behave when you think no one is watching or when you believe someone has nothing to offer. Greed and entitlement can poison even the closest family bonds, turning love into a transaction. It shows that true strength lies not in wealth, but in dignity, honesty, and the courage to set boundaries, even if it means walking away from those you once loved to protect the legacy and respect you have earned. What would you have done if you were in Leo's place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories.